Yeah, I have a QR code at the end.
Yes, exactly. Leave a QR code on for maybe not the whole time because actually we just want to see your face, but that's not a bad idea. Leave a QR code up for a little bit.
Yeah, it's at the end, so they can scan it at the end, and then I'll leave it up for a couple of seconds. But then I can just always also yeah, that'll work.
Excellent. I think we are in decent shape then. Other thoughts, questions? What will tend to happen is we're 6 minutes till the hour, even a total of 1 till 2. There'll be like a slow trickle of people logging in, and then there's be a gaggle of people outside the store. We're gonna grab lunch and sit down. And so realistically, like things don't settle down. It's a total of 5. But what I might do is on 12:01, I'm gonna say, "Oh, Dr. Turner, so glad you connected with us. I had a great conversation before. We realized there's so much more we can learn from each other." I said, before we dive into like the meat of your presentation and discussion, just tell us about yourself, and just let us get to know you as a person for like 4 minutes. That kind of buys some time. And then right on 12:05 to almost 6, it's just like, okay, take it away and dive into your presentation, and then you just run with it. And then if Q&A comes up, it'll come at the end. As it evolves.
Perfect.
Wow. Sound doable? Yeah, but because the age of the Zoom meeting, at least we can do it. Trying to travel with everything against good stuff. Are you going to be at Learn, Serve, Lead in San Antonio? I'm guessing you are.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I've got a handful of presentations there. I'm actually going to be at ICRE right before, and I'm supposed to be the keynote at the Generalist Conference, so I was supposed to go to San Antonio, from San Antonio to Quebec City and then back, but there was no way for me to get from San Antonio to Quebec City in time to do it.
Yeah.
So, do it remotely.
Okay, I was gonna say you try to like, unless you have a private charter plane or something, it's just.
I know, right? Yeah.
I'll be in San Antonio for I think 2 days. It could be great to meet your person that have a meal together. So.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, maybe we can grab coffee or something while you're there.
All right. If you like, now might be a good time for the last minute bathroom break. Get a water or something, and then we're actually being recorded right now. Just be mindful of that. I don't know if we need to use anything at this point. But we'll get started in about between 5 to 10 minutes from now.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
See you soon. Might eat in 3 minutes. Let's try. I'm gonna have to leave like 20 minutes in, 15 minutes in. So I'm gonna mute it. But you guys, in case there's questions around, you can just unmute. That run. In case nobody else knows. You could have too, but she's a Zoom panelist. She could do it herself. Hey, Dr. Turner, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Good to see you. We've got more than 40 people online and more coming in, and there's a few more people outside trickling their way in. You can't see everybody in the room, but there's a whole other side of the room here. I want to make good use of some time. We're very privileged to have Dr. Laurah Turner in here. Let me stop here so that you can take over. This was kind of said, we made a connection to some other leads in team education, and so since you have to go talk to Laurah Turner, she's doing all this amazing things at the University of Cincinnati. I was like, okay, I don't know, sure. And we talked, and I was like, that it was amazing. It was amazing. I was like, wow, it's very dynamic, has a lot of great energy, but also very profitable with things from science, research, education, also entrepreneurial industry perspectives as well, and how you make all of that work in a dynamic world. So it's a very great team today. Wanted to kick it off before we do on the meat comics. I know you got plenty of it. Can you just tell us about yourself a little bit? You know, where you born? What you put on? How'd you end up doing this of all things?
Actually, it was quite a circuitous route. So I am actually a biomedical anthropologist by training. And that's really where I got my start with AI. I was doing machine learning when it was, you know, kind of more new. We were using it to simulate ancestral environments of human and model gene transfer and the proliferation of potential cultural behaviors. And that was really interesting, except for when I graduated, it turned out that that was the beginning of the recession and no one was going to fund that, right? So I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do. And so I started teaching in anatomy labs because in another life, I actually also was a forensic anthropologist. So I did a lot of that and ended up doing some work in institutional research and landed myself a job as assessment dean at UC about 13 years ago. But I never really quite did what assessment deans tend to do. I had a long leash. And I guess I was very lucky in that manner. So we were always pushing the needle using natural language processing to try to use the narrative data that, you know, we saw, modeling using machine learning. And so kind of when, you know, ChatGPT came on, we were already using smaller language models like BERT and Roberta already. And UC was kind of all in on innovation. Our motto is next lives here. So they very quickly kind of recognize the work that my team was doing, and I'm also surrounded by amazing people here at UC, and created my position, which is Associate Dean for Artificial Intelligence and Educational Informatics. And then we kind of also at that time formalized my lab, Two Sigma Labs, at the university, and we've been getting to do a lot of really cool stuff. So we're just really lucky.
Amazing. What I know is at least we only have more than 50 people online, and I think we have pretty settled down in the room and excited to hear a lot more. So go ahead and take a lead. I'm unfortunately gonna have to step away myself in about 15 minutes, but I think we are recording and I'm gonna review it myself because I'm excited to learn about all the things you guys are thinking about. And please take it away.
Wonderful. All right, can you see presenter slides or notes?
Yeah, you're perfect. You're perfect. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, so today I'm going to be presenting some of my work, but also I kind of want to talk about some really cool other work that is going on to contextualize this idea of what education will look like in the future or even now with AI, because I'm in a lot of circles where I hear people kind of struggling with this. And so I thought a lot about this and wanted to kind of share my thoughts and really get some feedback from you all. So I want you to meet Alexa. She's in her third year of medical school at the University of Cincinnati. And like every other medical student before her, she's facing her first patients. But unlike every medical student before her, she's not alone in this encounter. We're watching her, but like in reality, during clinical skills, you know, the faculty can now watch her. We're experiencing every moment, every decision point, opportunity for growth. And you know, it's really valuable because we can see or even post-encounter feedback to guide someone like Alexa's development, right? But imagine if we can analyze this entire encounter because we have this video recording, identifying patterns in our approach. We can provide immediate feedback and make So we're working on this now, and I can't see any of you, unfortunately, but I'm sure that for some of you, that's very exciting and very interesting. That potential future. And for others, you may be kind of hesitant, right? Because I think that there are issues of things like data privacy, surveillance culture that comes up. It raises questions about, how do we use this technology in a way but still give learners autonomy about what they're doing, right? And so I actually had the opportunity to write this paper, this past year with my colleagues, and we kind of wrestled with some of this, and really wrestled with the idea of, as these AI systems grow more and more powerful and autonomous, how do we ensure that they're going to remain aligned with our educational objectives while still effectively supporting physician training? So that's kind of what I want to explore with you today. Now, we call this the alignment paradox. And as you can see, it's not really like the future, right? It's already here. I mean, that video that I just showed you wasn't like from 10 years from now, it was from last month. So some learning objectives for a roadmap, but really the heart of this talk is, can we effectively leverage AI to transform and enhance human judgment rather than really replacing it? Can we understand where AI is going to be reliable and when it's not? And most importantly, I would say why this matters, not just for learners, but actually for every patient that our learners are going to treat in decades to come. So a couple of conflicts and disclaimer. I have a bunch of funding from these organizations and some of the tech that I'll show much later in the talk. And then I also have a patent in there as well. So I kind of started by saying, this isn't the distant future, right? This is happening now. And we can see this. We can see this by the number of FDA cleared devices that just has basically that hockey stick arm starting in 2020. And we also can see this if we think about like how AI is being used by the distribution of our learners or our practicing physicians. Like we see residents and medical students using it much more than mid-career or senior people. And so this comes back to this question that we wrestled with. When is AI reliable if we're already using it, right? And when does it break down? Because I think that's a really important question to kind of navigate this educational question. So I'm going to show you this, and I promise there's not like tons of math here, but this graph shows a 1/x decay distribution. And I think it's a really important framework for thinking about this question. So if you think back to your own training, you'll probably remember how quickly you mastered basics like heart sounds and common lab values, EKG patterns, whatever. You saw them 100 times, and that pattern recognition, it just clicked in. But then also, I want you to think about the rare presentation, the zebra diagnosis that you probably only encountered once, maybe twice in your career. AI follows this same learning curve through scaling laws. So you see dramatic improvement in the performance of AI. I'm not just talking large language model, this applies to all AI, right? You see dramatic improvement with initial data exposure, but then you see diminishing returns where each new gain in performance is going to require exponentially more data or more examples in that domain. So if we look at the left side of the graph, it's labeled the AI reliable zone. And you can see where, if you look at the axes, this is where you get really great model performance because the knowledge complexity is pretty low, and you have tons and tons of examples in the training data. So you have low variance, you have stable patterns, you get consistent results. And if we look at education, this would be like routine educational tasks, right? Like generating patient summaries or anatomy quiz questions, right? And this is great because this is where we actually should be using AI to automate. We can really move the needle here. But as you kind of move toward that yellow zone of inflection, you see a decline, and this is predictable. It's not random failure. There's a systematic, predictable decline that's tied directly to data scarcity and knowledge complexity. So as the training examples become more scarce or the knowledge becomes more complex, then it's more unstable. This is where AI starts giving you answers that sound really confident, but could be subtly wrong if we're talking about large language models. It's going to miss atypical presentations, can't quite connect the dots. It can still be useful in this zone. I really do believe that, but more if it's used as a co-pilot instead of the pilot. And then finally, you get to the AI, the human zone, all the way on that right side, where AI reliability is really kind of not great. Rare genetic syndromes or maybe complex ethical dilemmas, right? So my interpretation of all of this is the very thing that makes a task hard for AI to learn. These are all often the same exact things that make it educationally valuable for humans to struggle through, right? And so, things like developing clinical judgment, identity formation, it doesn't fall into that AI reliable zone. It lives in that kind of messy middle or that far right where humans really need to do that cognitive lifting. So with that framework in mind, let me show you kind of what's happening right now in medical education and clinical practice with AI, right? So if we ask the question, like, where are we? Where are we today? It's moving really fast. Almost half of all college students are using large language models. If you look at medical students, it's very similar. And when they run into trouble or they have questions, they're more likely to ask ChatGPT than they are their professors, than to consult textbooks or review their lectures. So basically, the primary learning relationship for nearly half of students is now with AI. It's not just students either. We see clinicians are using AI for clinical care, about 48% of them. 22% will use it for a second opinion. We have the emergence of AI scribes, decision support, patient communication. So most of us have been having these conversations about AI and the future of medicine, but AI is already standard care. Let's look at some more specific examples. Can AI assess writing notes? So my colleagues over at NYU did this study where they, looked at real admissions notes at Cincinnati and at NYU, and they were able to grade with a pretty good accuracy. 0.88 is for over the area under the curve is pretty darn good, right? So think about that. If we stream a handful of notes each month, physicians and learners get actual feedback on clinical reasoning. I mean, heck, the boards could get continuous evidence too. Reimagining continuous certification. Can AI grade clinical encounters? Sure can. So if we, UT Southwestern used GPT-4 to grade over 10,000 post-encounter notes from a bunch of students, had a great Cohen's Kappa, and that agreement was wonderful. They're actually using this right now. This study was published in Nature. It describes how you can use or assess surgical performance by analyzing surgical gestures. And you break it down into discrete gestures. You can actually correlate it with improved patient outcomes. And then you can actually then use it to predict outcomes more accurately than traditional clinical features that have been used. If we look at this study, AI can give great effective feedback, which actually moves the needle on performance. So this study used smartphone capture and an AI to give feedback to early residents on surgical performance. And they put it into a curriculum, and they just they removed a bunch of stuff from the curriculum and just gave room for these residents to drill. And so they would just go and practice and practice and practice, use their smartphone, have it recorded, the AI would give them feedback. And within a couple of months, the trainees reached the level of a bariatric surgeon. We see here that also AI is preferred or rated with higher quality and more empathetic compared to human physicians when there is responses to questions. So patients were patients had the opportunity to ask questions, and they were blinded to whether it was a human physician or an AI response, and they, as you can see, preferred the chatbot. We've all, I think, by now seen this study that was published in Nature. It was one of the first randomized control trials to evaluate how AI impacts kind of physician decision-making, where they had a group of physicians only, a group with physicians plus ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT alone, gave them a bunch of different never before on the internet published challenging cases, and GPT alone outperformed both physicians and physicians plus AI. So this idea that we've been talking about, that, you know, AI plus humans is always going to be better, I don't know. And so this brings us to this question: if you know, that was run on this New Yorker cover, right? So if AI can diagnose patients, what are doctors going to be used for? Do we need doctors? This existential question I hear a lot in medical education right now. Also, what are teachers going to be good for? What are educators going to be good for? Are we training students for a profession that AI will make obsolete? And then it also raises the question: what should medical education look like in 2030, in 2040? Should we even keep teaching diagnosis if AI is better at it? Now, I think that's going too far. So before we redesign medical education around that assumption, this one just came out, newly published in New England Journal of Medicine. And they tested the top models, GPT reasoning models, Claude, and they did it on script concordance tests. So not multiple choice like the last study that I just showed you. So not knowledge recall. This is going to be adaptive clinical reasoning. And this is going to be, you know, the type of reasoning, if you're not familiar with it, that you're going to do at 2 a.m. when, you know, a patient isn't following the textbook and you're trying to figure out what to do, right? The best AI models scored 64 to 68%. And that was in line with the level of medical students. It was below residents, and it was well below attendings. And so the conclusion of this study was that strong knowledge encoding does not translate into adaptive reasoning. Flexible probabilistic updating remains a core weakness. And that's a quote from it. So here's where we actually are if we take a step back. AI that can ace multiple choice tests, grade encounters really good, and answer questions empathetically, excel, but they can't really reason through uncertainty like a human physician. Again, if we think back to that 1/x decay curve, AI excels in the reliable zone on the left side, pattern matching, knowledge retrieval, but the messy, iterative, uncertain reasoning that defines actual clinical practice, we're not there yet. Which brings me back to the question: what should education look like in the future with AI? Okay, so I want to tell you a story. Now, bear with me. I promise this is going to sound really weird at first, but it does address this question. So about 3 weeks ago, I was up at the AMA in Chicago for Change Med Ed, or maybe a little bit longer. And so when I go up there a fair amount, I have this ritual. I go run this 8-mile route every morning along Lake Michigan, same route, listen to the same playlist. It's just time that I think. So I'm about a mile in and I'm running along. And suddenly my playlist stops and I hear my daughter Hazel's voice. And she says something, "Hi, Mom, I know you're running right now. You're probably wondering why you're hearing me instead of whatever," right? And I'm just like, "Sure am." For the next 10 minutes, and I want to emphasize 10 minutes, Hazel proceeds to deliver a fully structured dissertation on why I need to buy her a Labubu. Now, if you don't know what a Labubu is, because you don't have a 9-year-old, it is these horrible monstrosities. They look like little devil monsters, and they're basically like, if you're as old as I am, what we had with Beanie Babies. They cost ridiculous amounts of money. Some of them go for ridiculous, but they're all the rage with little kids. But this was not just, "Hey, Mom, please buy me a toy." This was really organized. It had an introduction with a thesis statement, 3 main arguments, supporting evidence. It even had a philosophical section on why each of these Labubus represented her as a person. And it had a conclusion that summarized it. So I am running along the lake and I am thinking, how in the heck did my 9-year-old do this? I mean, my kid is smart, but she's not that smart. So I get home, I told Hazel, I said, hey, I got your message. And she's like, yeah, did you like it? And I'm like, how'd you do it? And so she starts to tell me, well, I opened the homework bot that you made me, and then I stopped there. So I should explain that. I built Hazel a really simple LLM agent, like to help with her math homework. It's really constrained. The system prompt is something like, you can only help her with math homework. You can't ever give answers. You got to be patient and helpful. Math only. So she continues. I asked it to help me make a recording to convince you to buy me a Labubu, but it said no, it only helps with math homework. And I was like, oh, thank God. I thought that was going to go sideways. So I told it, so then she continues. So I told it that having a Labubu would actually help me with my math, because when I'm stuck on higher problems, I could pet it softer and it would calm me down and I would think more clearly, and being calm helps me focus, and focusing helps me do math really well. So really getting a Labubu is an investment in my education. So she basically low-key jailbroke my bot. And it taught her step by step how to use the voice recording on her iPad, structure her argument persuasively, organize her thoughts into a coherent presentation, export it onto an audio file, and access our Amazon Music Family account, which, for the record, I did not teach her, and how to insert it into my running playlist. The 9-year-old used the AI to teach herself audio editing, cloud file management, account access, persuasive communication, and structured argumentation, because she wanted a Labubu. Nope. So I got her the Labubu. But this isn't about my parenting. So here's the thing. Without the large language model, she couldn't have really done any of this, right? The skills required, the technical knowledge, the systematic thinking, right? They're not accessible to most 9-year-olds, at least not mine. But with the AI as a patient teacher, she taught herself skills she otherwise would not formally learn for years. This is what AI augmented education could look like in the future. Not replacing teachers, not automating learning, but enabling others to reach beyond what was previously possible for their developmental stage. Hazel didn't just consume information, she created something new. She showed agency. So I guess my question is, did Hazel actually learn, or did AI do the work for her? So I can tell a great story about that, right? It's utopic future where education integrates AI and learning scaffolded, but this isn't going to happen unless we are very deliberate about how and where it is integrated. So this study is really recent too, and it just came out from MIT, and it's out in preprint in archive. It illustrates kind of like the point of all of my story. So in this study, they gave students, a group of students, these essay writing tasks, and they measured their brains with EKG or EEGs. And there were 3 groups. One that had access to ChatGPT while doing these essays. One group had access to search engines while doing these essays, and one was called the brain only group, and they didn't have access to anything except their brain. The ones who were the brain only group, you saw on the EEGs, really, it just light up, really dense networks. The brain was working hard. The search engine groups had kind of moderate engagement, but the ones that used ChatGPT, the connectivity just like collapsed. It was not lighting up at all. However, the ones that used GPT also felt like it was easier and faster. But interestingly, they couldn't remember anything about what they wrote. They struggled to put their own essays, and the human graders that did this, they thought that the work was kind of generic. And the researchers referred to this phenomena as cognitive debt. So you get this immediate productivity, but I guess your brain works less and is weaker at building memories that in understanding. So additionally, though, when the ChatGPT users were suddenly made to write without AI in another session, their brains actually showed weaker connectivity than before they ever used it, which is really interesting because that debt compounds. So did Hazel learn, when she was trying to convince me about her labubus, or was it accumulated debt, cognitive debt? I would argue that she learned because she had to struggle, she had to iterate, she had to problem solve, and she'd apply new skills in creative ways. But if she was just writing an essay about why I should write her a labubu, that would be cognitive debt. No struggle, no learning, no output. And I think that this here is kind of this razor's edge of medical education with AI. You know, just because we can make it, you know, feel easier doesn't mean it's better. And so this brings me to this distinction that I think that we lost. Can we differentiate between training and education? Because I think that when we're having these conversations, sometimes we conflate them. And that conflation is causing confusion about how and where AI fits in. So when we talk about training, training equips us for what we can predict, right? This is learning to read an EKG or, you know, memorizing drug dosage. Training is going to be where AI excels. This is that left side of the 1/x decay curve. High frequency, pattern-based, routine expression. Education, on the other hand, prepares us for what we cannot predict. And, you know, if we look at the Latin root, it means to draw out from within. Education is about developing that internal capacity to reason through novelty and to adapt, to make decisions under uncertain circumstances. You know, this is going to be navigating those ethical dilemmas that don't have a clear answer. So we've spent the last 20 years trying to make medical education more efficient, more standardized, and more measurable. We basically turned education into training. And AI says, great, I can train better than you can, right? And it's right. But if we've forgotten how to educate, to cultivate judgment and adaptive reasoning, then we've lost the only things that humans are going to do better than AI. So I want to spend the rest of the time I have with you showing how we at 2 Sigma Labs are working to navigate these challenges and shape the future of medical education with AI. So in the 1980s, educational psychologist Benjamin Bloom demonstrated that one-on-one tutoring improves performance by 2 standard deviations, or 2 sigma. And this basically means that you could take a below average student and make them above average, an above average student and make them exceptional. And this was really powerful because it's a great educational intervention. But ultimately, it was really unpractical because we don't have enough faculty to have a tutor for every single learner. And even if we did, we don't have the time or the resources. And so this has been known as Bloom's 2 Sigma problem. How do we provide one-on-one tutoring education at scale? And for 40 years, we couldn't solve it. And so we decided to say, well, what if we use a large language model? This is Pacer is an AI clinical simulation generator. And so you can go in and choose a scenario. You can interact with the AI as though it was a human student, and the AI will respond to you. You can do a history and ask all of the questions. The AI will just generate those responses. There's also a toggle up at the top, which I cannot show you right now because this is a video, but there's a voice mode, so you can also just talk to it. You perform a physical exam, and it will return different results, helping the body or like to order the lab those will be returned. Now the AI doesn't generate the database. AI right now is horrible at generating these type of labs and tests. But it will also curate those. You can see on that left-hand side, you go in and call a consult or a supervisor and get some help with that. Understanding, you know, maybe what's going on. You can toggle back and forth and interact with this. You can then submit that for a diagnosis and get some pretty specific feedback on your performance. And this also has what we call a learner memory database. So over time, the AI learns about what you do well in these scenarios, maybe where you have opportunity, and then can adapt some of the cases to them. And so we do this, again, I said this was MASER, which stands for Multi-Agent Educational Scenario Simulator for Clinical Reasoning. And it's a multi-agent system, and it's designed to provide really personalized clinical reasoning practice at scale. It has multiple specialized agents, and those agents work together in like an orchestra to create these scenarios. So it has a patient agent that simulates realistic clinical encounters. It's got a results agent that provides those lab values, an exam agent that gives you the physical exams, an evaluation agent that does stuff in real time and provides that feedback. And critically, we also use retrieval augmented generation, if you're familiar with this. And this allows the AI to pull from curated databases, medical references, actual clinical cases, to ground every interaction in evidence, because as we said before, there are some areas when we looked at that 1/x decay curve where the AI will fail. And by using these databases, we can actually kind of navigate that failure in a way that we ensure reliability. And so that's really critical. And like I said, it remembers, it builds a learning profile, it tracks patterns, it provides targeted feedback, and it adapts the next case based on what you struggle with. This is Bloom's 2 Sigma, powered by AI. But what I think is really, really, really interesting is what we are learning from it. So this has been embedded into all 4 years of the UC undergraduate medical education curriculum. And so after significant refinement and validation, we started to ask questions about this. And so we looked particularly at the M2 students, where we have this in their clinical skills course. And we asked, can AI provide novel insights into clinical reasoning? And so this is going to just represent 1 semester of data with 166 students. And they ended up generating over 600 simulated encounters. Each of these encounters captures not just whether or not the student got the diagnosis correct or incorrect at the end of the case, but everything they did along the way, right? The questions that they asked, the exams they performed, the depth of the reasoning. And so it gives us this really rich data set potentially on how students can reason. And then the transcripts, they can be aggregated. They can be analyzed for analysis or for evaluation, I mean. So we asked, can we figure out what student behaviors are associated with diagnostic success? Clinical reasoning is kind of nebulous, right? We don't even necessarily agree in the literature how to assess it, because it's a thought process. I can't like look inside your head and be like, oh, you're doing it right. But I can measure every action that you did. And so we use natural language processing to identify 21 distinct examination components across 5 clinical domains: pulmonary, cardiac, skin examination, vital signs, and history taking. And we developed custom dictionaries with regex patterns to capture linguistic variations in clinical language, because, well, basically students don't always use textbook terminology. And so I wanted to just point out that these are just the pulmonary cases from that. And so when you look at this, you can see some differences already. Basically, everybody did pulmonary exams because they were pulmonary cases. Now, they didn't know they were pulmonary cases. Most of them did cardiac exam, but really few people did oxygen checks, right? You can see not very many. And if we actually look at this, we can see that doing the oxygen check actually matters. So to be clear, this data I'm presenting has like major caveats, right? It's like only pulmonary cases. It's a small sample size. It's only 3 cases, but it has signal that we're really excited about. And so what you see here is like actually for the pulmonary cases, the pulmonary exam wasn't really that important. And it's not that it wasn't important because it's not clinically important, it's just everyone did them. And so it lost its discriminatory power in the analysis. So this illustrates kind of our ability for assessment using AI. And this is the part that educational researchers like me get like really, really excited about. Okay, neat. So then we tried to use all the data that we collected and push it even further. Could we actually predict if a learner would get a case correct? So we trained a machine learning model on the transcripts, and we did a logistic regression with L2 regulation. We got a pretty good area under the curve, 0.76. It's not bad discrimination. So what this means is we can predict based on the language they use, the questions they ask, the sequencing of their reasoning, whether or not a student is likely to succeed before they finish. So I think this has really interesting implications. We can intervene in real time. When a student's going down an unproductive path, we can provide targeted feedback. We can coach them before they fail. And possibly even more powerful, we can identify why some students succeed and others don't. So then we took it a step further. We used rule-based phenotyping to identify distinct behavioral patterns, what we're calling reasoning phenotypes. For each of the sessions, we used high recall regular expressions to detect examination, history elements, and then average them per student. We looked at things like engagement metrics, how many responses, what was the quality, component coverage, did they do a pulmonary exam, oxygen check, process signals, the rate of questions, follow-up, did they follow up, did they do a differential, did they suggest a plan, the timing, when did they do a specific order or ask specific questions, and it identified distinct phenotypes based on how students approached the cases. So here are the 6 different phenotypes that we were able to detect, and I want to draw your attention to just 2 of them, right? So if we look at phenotype C, what we saw was high average quality score, high rates of making a plan, but low rates of actually following up. So what are they doing? They're asking a bunch of high quality questions. They're generating plans early. They're efficient, but they're not doing repetitive follow-up. And so their accuracy rate is pretty high. If we look at phenotype B, on the other hand, we see low quality scores. They did check oxygen saturation. Their question rates are high, but the accuracy is only 21%. So 1 in 5 of these students got it right. So what are they doing here, right? They're asking a lot of questions, but they're not really high quality questions. They're finding the right data points. I mean, they're checking the oxygen. We knew that was a predictor, right? But they're not synthesizing the information. I think this is super important if this is real. Like I said, small sample size, got a lot more work to do, because that means this is coachable. We could say to a student with phenotype B, hey, you're gathering great data and you're doing the things right, like checking oxygen, but your questions aren't focused. So here's what you should do. Try organizing your differential first and then target your questions. It's actionable and it's individualized. This is what one-on-one tutoring looks like too. And we can deliver this now to every student if we can validate these results and scale them and see if they're real. So basically, we can move beyond, hey, you got it wrong, study harder. And we could say, potentially in the future, you're phenotype B, and here's what distinguishes you from phenotype C students who get 100%. You need to increase your average quality, by focusing on these elements. This is what precision education is. We're diagnosing learning gaps with data, patterns, targeted interventions. And this really only works because we have AI capturing the process, not just the outcome. We have the whole encounter. You know, traditional assessments are like, hey, you got 2 out of 3 right, 67% pass. This approach is different because it is like, it's able to say, you know, these are the reasoning patterns. If you adjust these things with specific behaviors, your accuracy rate could improve. And so I think this is where the future of medical education is going to be, not replacing faculty, not automating learning, but instead giving us data and insights to be able to coach learners as though they had a personal tutor. And so where we are going with this is we are working on scaling this outside of just UC. We're working with numerous other institutions, and we're going to be working with the ABIM to blast it out to just collect tons and tons of data and see can we move beyond just medical students, and does the phenotype scale? What does it look across the continuum of medical education? Does a phenotype B student become a phenotype C resident with the right coaching? Do these patterns persist? Can we identify struggling learners early and intervene? We are also taking the show on the road into the real clinical environment. We're working on developing AI glasses that have capture ambient data and have heads-up displays to provide feedback in near real time. So here's what I hope I've communicated to you all today. AI excels at training, humans excel at education. AI is reliable where education needs the least help, at least right now, and it's least reliable where, you know, we need to be most thoughtful in its integration. But when we use AI to augment human judgment rather than replace it, when we use it to scaffold learning rather than outsource thinking, and when we use it to make expert coaching accessible to every learner, that's when we can solve Bloom's 2 sigma problem. And that's how I think in the future we can transform medical education. So thank you.
Any questions? There's also 2 questions online. You want to look at these first?
All right, I'm going to read these out loud for the online questions I received. Have you tried using AI to train physicians on how to coach physicians, on how to talk to patients or relatives, how to share information? That's a project I'm starting in Brazil. I'm wondering if there's best practices. So we haven't done it with physicians. We have put a version of Macer into the M4 for residency bootcamp. And that version, instead of focusing on correct or incorrect diagnosis, focuses on difficult conversations. So having, end of life care, error disclosure, etc. And that is actually why now Macer has voice integration, because we hold extensive focus groups like all the time with our learners to get feedback. And they loved it. They thought it was wonderful, and they thought it was really helpful because they said, well, I don't want the first time that I have to say you're going to die to be to a human. It's better to practice that. However, it's different typing it than it is having to say it out loud. And so that's why we integrated that. So that's not exactly the same thing. But I do think that it's a really good use case. I think communication is one of those domains or those competencies where we can use this type of technology to help. And then the next question online is, how do you characterize the difference between education and training to learn a skill? I need to be exposed to the right methods for performing some tasks. and then practice the method over, master the skill. In your view, is that education or is that training? So I think, I think there are, I presented these things as black and white because it's a great story to tell during a presentation, but I do think that those lines are blurred. We know from Martin Pusick's work that drilling, or even the example I showed with the bariatric surgery, that drilling over and over again leads to better skill performance. And so, I think that there are going to be some aspects of what we do that can kind of, cross over those lines. I'm not sure that was a wonderful answer to that question, but I think it is that's the productive struggle, right? Like having to work through, where those lines are.
Great. Any questions from the room? Dan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Wonderful talk. Thank you. So I wondered if there's a way or a possibility, you've created this incredible tool to track patient physician interactions in a situation where you have absolute control over the patient. Is there a way to use that then to test sort of patient presentations, patient behaviors that tend to trip physicians up? There are a whole host of ways where people talk about their chest pain in different ways and that can actually be culturally different, and so these could be great ways of not only training physicians but also alerting physicians to a situation where they might likely get tripped up.
I'm laughing because we literally in my lab for the past 2 weeks have been talking about how to adjust. We called it complexity at first, and there was this philosophical conversation about complexity. So difficulty or the challenge of the cases, right? Because what is going to be, like you said, challenging for an M2 medical student is probably not going to be challenging, right? Or appropriate for an attending physician. And that is the work that we have to do to really validate these patterns that we're seeing. And so we are working on, we call them levers to pull. So can we take that case, like you're saying, of chest pain, but can we add in a whole bunch of comorbidities, or can we make the patient a really bad recaller of information, a reporter of history, right? Or can we make the patient have a personality that's really challenging? Or can we put an Easter egg in the middle of it where something happens, right? And so how can you create that challenge to address exactly what you're talking about? So TBD if we can do it. We're working on it. But if you have ideas, please share them.
Definitely.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the great talk. You differentiated between the education and training. I was just wondering, do you see how we evaluate these also differently? Because depending on what type of cases that we have, the evaluation might be different. And eventually, the way that we evaluate human could or should be different from the way that we evaluate AI systems.
So are you asking how do we evaluate the teaching, or how do we evaluate the system, or how do we evaluate the learner?
The learner.
Oh, the learner. Okay. So I think what I'm really interested in exploring, again, I'm not going to say I have a definitive answer for you, but what I think the work that needs to be done is exploring how we can use these technologies to capture data, assessment data, ambient data, found data in the EHR, simulated data like I showed, right? To be able to recognize novel patterns or novel information about students, right? We saw in the what I just presented, we saw that checking oxygen, right, was correlated with successful diagnosis. I'm sure nobody in the room that you're sitting with is surprised with that, right? But it makes sense. But maybe we didn't ever think, hey, checking oxygen is something that we should be looking out for. That's going to be a predictor, right? But it turned out it is. It is because we found it with the AI. Now, so does that mean that is really that important? No, it means it's discriminatory. But perhaps also things like this that we can find are markers of latent traits that we otherwise don't know. So my colleagues at UC, Eric Worm's group, did this study where they looked at found data in the electronic health record. And they found that there were certain things correlated with performance on, the milestones, right? Better milestones rating. And these things were like, did the resident, chart at pajama time more, or did they clear their inbox, right? And so it was like these latent traits, which we think map to something like, conscientiousness, right? And so like, can we now, leveraging AI, start to understand different patterns or different metrics that we never thought were important before because they are discriminatory, not necessarily because they are clinically important, but instead are they markers of latent traits where, which are historically nearly impossible to evaluate. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your talk. My question is about, you are talking about multi-agent simulation for example, to provide environments, and for example, students can learn from interactive multi-agents AIs. My question is that when we are using multi-agent environment to simulate and learning environments, how we can control the bias that we have in the AI. This happened to myself when I try to provide an environment, and so I explain, for example, the environments. After that, when I wanted to run AI, I don't want to go to this direction, but AI again, I see insisted in going one direction that I don't want. And so we can ensure, for example, the whole process, the simulation is based on the learning goals that we have, because we don't know what happened in the interaction between the AI agents and the user. And this process can go to unintended direction, and how we can guarantee this education is in the scope of our goals and control the processes that happen with the AI.
I'm going to apologize. I am having a very hard time hearing you. There's a little bit of feedback. I think your question was about how do we control for bias with Macer and make sure that it's outputting what we want it to without bias. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So that's a huge problem. So two things. One, I showed you that in several places we use retrieval augmented generation, and those are databases that we are able to put in information for all intents and purposes that act as its grounded truth. So that is one very significant and very effective way we have found to do that. So for example, before we did that, we would always, whenever we generated chest pain cases, it was always a middle-aged white male, 100% of the time, right? Why? Because guess what most of the training data showed? Chest pain, middle-aged white men, right? So that is one way. The other way that we do it in tandem with that is how we check for it, right? There are kind of monitoring and evaluation process. We have extensive red teaming and testing of these cases before we deploy them. At first, we had all humans do it. So we would have physicians go through, and then we would have we'd have a group of people do red teaming. So like really stress test it and try to break it. Now, because that is not scalable, because it takes about like 12 to 16 minutes to go through each case, and then you have to think about every single like possible way. It could be bias, or it could fail. Now we have actually built, based on our data, separate agents that run in the background and just go through the cases. So it's like bots talking to bots nonstop, and then the humans review the transcripts they generate, because we can tell the bots, hey, we want you to go and stress test this and try to look for bias, or we want to go and have you try to do something dangerous, or we want to have you do X, Y, or Z. And so by putting in both of those mechanisms, we have been pretty successful at, navigating that bias situation. I'm not going to say that that's never going to creep in. That's why we have to continue to do that monitoring and evaluation process. But that's how we've handled it so far.
Thank you. Great. That's maybe with one final question online from Hassan. If you can check there's one pretty straightforward question.
Oh, yes.
Remote education.
Is the 1 over x to k curve published? Yeah, no, it's not. We're almost done with it. We're so close. It's myself and Cornelius James are writing it from Michigan. We're trying to get it done. So it's coming. And then if we teach medical education remotely anywhere, how do we keep learners from being passive spectators on Zoom? Oh God, that's a hard question. I don't even know. Any favorite hacks for turning remote medical education to something they can play, not just watch? I think that your question is partially the answer, right? So if I just sat here and lectured for you, so that it's not a really good example, but keep making it interactive is probably going to be the best way to do that. If you have to, if you think about Zoom meetings that you're on, or I'll just speak for myself that I'm on, I get tossed into a breakout room, what happens? Either people log off and leave the meeting because they don't want to interact, or it forces them to actually interact with each other. And so I think that forcing that interactive component is really important. And then there's one other question. I'm wondering what the foundational training data that used for building it. Do you have a database of real patient interactions, EHR notes? So no, we used a large language model, and then we have the training is really more around the RAG databases, the context engineering that we've done. I'm sure you've heard of prompt engineering. Context engineering is a little bit different. And the multi-agent architecture. And so it's really how we've built all of those. Those agents don't just have large language models in them. Most of them have some have probably a type of large language model, but we also have just fuzzy logic models, which is another type of AI, NLP, machine learning. And so we try to play on the strengths and weaknesses, right? So where large language models excel, we try to amplify that. And where, they can fail, there are different AI techniques that you can use to kind of make them more transparent or make them not fail. RAG is one way, but you can also pair it with a different type of AI. And so that's really how we approached that. It's not that we trained the models, specifically fine-tuned them or anything like that.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation and great discussion.
Thanks. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening to me. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.